7 hours before his wedding, Yu Kang-hyun was cutting through JFK Terminal 4 like a blade. The Seoul Alliance ceremony was already in motion. The syndicate's private jet was fueled. Chairman Yu had made it clear there was no version of tonight where his son didn't board that plane. Then a small boy ran straight into him. The impact scattered a half-eaten snack across the polished floor. The boy stumbled back, ready to apologize, and stopped. His gray eyes went wide. Slowly, one small hand reached up and touched his own silver-white hair, then pointed directly at Kang-hyun. The same hair, the same eyes, the same face, just 6 years old. Kang-hyun's chest locked, because he wasn't looking at a child. He was looking at himself. Then the boy tilted his head and asked the question that cracked the entire terminal open. "Why do you look like me?" Kang-hyun couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then a voice cut through the crowd. "Travis." 6 years dissolved in a single heartbeat. Because he knew that voice. He had spent 6 years trying to bury it. He turned. Kate Higgins stood 10 feet away, composed, unreadable, and watching him with the calm precision of someone who had already calculated every move on a board he didn't even know he was standing on. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't running. She was waiting. And between them stood a little boy with silver-white hair and gray eyes, smiling up at his father for the very first time, completely unaware that his smile had just dismantled an empire. Welcome to Toni's Mafia Stories, where the most dangerous person in the room is never the one with the gun. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it? We want to see our global family in the comments. And if you're new here, hit like and subscribe so you never miss a story. Now, let's go. 7 hours from now, Yu Kang-hyun is supposed to marry another woman and seal the most powerful criminal alliance in East Asia. Instead, he is standing frozen in an airport terminal, staring at a 6-year-old boy who wears his face, while the woman he abandoned 6 years ago watches him with eyes that hold no fear, no tears, and no mercy. Will he board that jet and choose his crown? Or will he finally choose the family that has been waiting, quietly, brilliantly, and dangerously, for him to arrive? But that moment, that frozen, breathless collision at JFK, was not where this story began. This story began 6 years ago, in Seoul in autumn, when the ginkgo trees along Blasian Row turned the color of old gold, and a young man who owned half the city somehow had no one to talk to. Yu Kang-hyun had everything a man was supposed to want: a corner office on the 42nd floor, a name that made boardrooms go quiet, a father who had built an empire from the ground up and expected his only son to carry it without ever letting it show that the weight was crushing him. Kang-hyun had learned early how to wear that weight like a tailored suit, perfectly pressed, perfectly still, never letting anyone see where it pulled. Then Kate Higgins walked into his international economics seminar and sat in the 3rd row with a highlighter in one hand and an argument already forming behind her eyes, and something in him went completely, unexpectedly still. She wasn't impressed by him. That was the first thing he noticed. She didn't flutter when he spoke. She didn't adjust her posture when he walked in. She simply looked at him the way she looked at everything, directly, carefully, as if she was deciding whether the thing in front of her was worth her full attention. He spent 3 weeks trying to earn it. Their romance was built in the small, unhurried hours that the performance of his life didn't own. Late evenings in a tiny pajangmacha near Gyeongbokgung, sharing spicy tteokbokki over textbooks, her laugh cutting through the cold air like something warm and entirely unguarded. Sunday mornings at the Han River, where she would read and he would watch the water, and for the first time in his adult life, feel absolutely no obligation to be Yu Kang-hyun, heir to anything. She called him on everything, quietly and without cruelty. When he deflected, she waited. When he performed, she simply looked at him until he stopped. She had a particular kind of patience that wasn't passive, it was surgical. It found the real thing underneath the presentation and refused to settle for less. He fell in love with her the way a man falls when he doesn't realize he's been standing on the edge, gradually, and then completely. He told himself his father would understand. He told himself there was time. He told himself that love this real would be enough to hold against anything the name demanded. He was wrong about all three. Because somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that overlooked all of Seoul, Chairman Yu's people had already begun to notice the American girl who was spending too much time with the crown prince. And a man who built an empire on control did not tolerate variables. The question wasn't whether Chairman Yu would move against her. The question was how much of his son's silence he was already counting on. He was counting on all of it. The first blow came quietly, the way the most vicious ones always do. Kate's university housing office sent a letter informing her that her on-campus accommodation had been administratively reassigned. A clerical error, they said, very sorry, nothing to be done. She had 2 weeks to vacate. Kang Hyun showed up that evening with his jaw tight and his hands in his pockets and told her not to worry. He would handle it. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded and started packing her books. He didn't handle it. 3 weeks later, her scholarship review board opened an inquiry anonymous complaint, academic irregularities under investigation. Kate sat across from the review committee alone, in a second language defending work she had written with her own brilliance, in a room full of people who had already made up their minds. She walked out with her head up and her hands steady and called Kang Hyun from the steps of the building. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was careful, measured. He said he was sorry. He said he needed more time. She had heard that before. This is the part that women who have lived will recognize, not the cruelty itself, but the specific exhaustion of watching someone you love choose comfort over courage, again and again, in ways small enough that he can still look himself in the mirror. Kang Hyun was not a bad man. That almost made it worse. He was a man who loved her genuinely and protected her not at all, and dressed his cowardice up as strategy. Kate noticed things. She had always noticed things. She noticed that when each new crisis arrived, Kang Hyun's shoulders would rise almost imperceptibly, a tightening, a bracing before he spoke. Not the posture of a man preparing to fight, the posture of a man preparing to absorb. She began to understand, slowly and without drama, that he was not trying to stop the wave. He was waiting to see if it would knock her down first. The question she turned over quietly, in the privacy of her own mind, was a precise one. Was he unable to stand up to his father, or had he simply decided she wasn't worth the cost? The visa issue came last. A processing irregularity, her student status, suddenly under review by the Immigration Bureau. The kind of bureaucratic knot that takes months to untangle and can quietly end everything. Kang Hyun came to her apartment that night. He sat across from her with his elbows on his knees and his eyes on the floor and said the words she had been dreading, not because they were cruel, but because they were so devastatingly small. Just give me a little more time, Kate, please. She looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, she didn't say anything at all. Her silence was the answer he didn't have the courage to hear. She gave him his time, 2 more weeks of it. 2 more weeks of watching him move through her life like a man walking a tightrope, present enough to feel like love, absent enough to change nothing. And then, on a Thursday evening in November, Kate's neighbor knocked on her door and told her the news was on. She turned on the television. The Yu family birthday gala was being broadcast live from the Grand Hyatt Seoul. The ballroom was full of people in expensive clothes performing expensive happiness, and there at the center of it all was Kang Hyun, in a black tuxedo, under golden light, standing on a stage that had clearly been built for this exact moment. His father stood to his left, commanding the room without raising his voice. And to Kang Hyun's right stood a young Korean woman in a white gown, poised and beautiful, and positioned with the deliberate precision of a business announcement. Chairman Yu took the microphone and spoke warmly about legacy, about alliance, about the future of the Yu family name. Kang Hyun stood perfectly still. His face was composed. His shoulders were level. He looked like a man who had made his peace with something, and that stillness, that terrible, practiced stillness, told Kate everything his words never had. She turned off the television. She didn't cry. She had known on some quiet, cellular level that this moment was coming. What she hadn't known, what she sat with now in the dark of her apartment, was how clean the grief would feel once the hopping finally stopped. There is a particular kind of heartbreak that doesn't shatter you. It simply clarifies everything. She went to the bathroom, opened the cabinet, looked at the test she had been too afraid to take for 11 days. She took it now. She sat on the edge of the tub for a long time afterward, holding the result in both hands, doing the quiet, serious work of a woman who has just understood exactly what her life is asking of her. Here is what Kate Higgins did not do. She did not call him. She did not go to the gala. She did not make a scene or send a letter or give Chairman Yu the satisfaction of watching her beg. She booked a one-way flight to Atlanta, packed 2 suitcases with the things that actually mattered, and was in the air before Kang Hyun's birthday cake was cut. She left with her dignity fully intact, and a secret tucked beneath her heart that she had already decided she would raise alone, love fiercely, and protect with everything she had. If you are watching this, and you are furious at what Chairman Yu did to this woman, if you are furious at Kang Hyun for standing on that stage and saying nothing, comment the word justice right now, because Kate deserved better. And this story is just getting started. But here is the question none of them considered that night. What do you do 6 years later when the child you are raising to be free walks into an airport and looks exactly like the man you left behind? 6 years later, that secret had silver-white hair and gray eyes and was currently standing in Terminal 4 of JFK Airport, looking between his mother and a stranger with the calm, curious confidence of a child who had never been taught to make himself small. Kate moved first. She always did. She crossed the terminal with measured steps, took Travis gently by the shoulder, and looked at Kang Hyun with the kind of eyes that have already finished grieving and have nothing left to perform. She did not look angry. Anger would have meant he still had the power to surprise her. She simply looked at him the way you look at weather, noted, accounted for, not in charge of her plans. Kang Hyun opened his mouth. She stopped him with 2 words. Not here. She said it quietly, for Travis's sake, and that quiet restraint cost her more than Kang Hyun would ever fully understand. She crouched down, whispered something in her son's ear that made him nod seriously and take her hand, and walked out of the terminal without looking back. Kang Hyun stood there for a moment, surrounded by the noise and movement of an airport that did not care what had just happened to him, and then he followed. Because what else could a man do when he had just looked into the face of every year he had wasted? Outside the terminal in the gray November cold, Kate turned to face him. She listened to approximately 45 seconds of his explanation. The timing, the wedding, the circumstances, the fact that he hadn't known before she stopped him again. Not cruelly, just finally. I know you didn't know, she said. You also didn't look. She put Travis in a rideshare, gave Kang Hyun one last unreadable look, and was gone. What no one watching from the outside could have known in that moment was this. Kate's hands were trembling slightly inside her coat pockets the entire time. Not from fear. From the extraordinary effort of standing still, that composed, in front of the one person who had ever made her feel like she wasn't enough, and knowing, with absolute certainty, that she was. Kang Hyun did not go to the airport. He did not board the jet. He drove to Kate's neighborhood, parked across the street from a modest house with warm light in the windows, and sat in a rental car through the night while New York got colder around him. He didn't have a plan. He just couldn't leave. Somewhere around 3 a.m., his phone lit up the dark interior of the car. His father. Not a call, a message. 4 sentences in Korean, precise and unhurried the way a man writes when he wants you to understand that he has already made decisions and is simply informing you of them. Kang Hyun read it twice. Then he set the phone face down on the passenger seat, very carefully, like a man setting down something that might detonate. He left it face down until morning. The message from his father sat there in the dark between them, unacknowledged, unanswered, gathering the specific weight that ultimatums gather when the person receiving them is no longer afraid in the way the sender intended. Chairman Yu had written that the jet would wait until 6 a.m., that after 6 a.m., There would be consequences. That a man who abandons his obligations does not deserve what he was born into. 6 a.m. came and went. Kang Hyun watched the sun come up over Kate's neighborhood, over the modest houses and the bare November trees, and the life she had built from nothing in a country that had not made things easy for her, and he felt something he had no clean word for. Not guilt exactly. The guilt was too small. This was more like finally seeing the full size of a debt you had been pretending was manageable. He hadn't eaten since the airport. He hadn't slept. He was sitting in yesterday's suit in a rental car that smelled like stale coffee, and he was, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, completely without a next move. The front door of Kate's house opened at 7:43 a.m. It was not Kate. Travis came down the porch steps in a puffy winter jacket that was slightly too big for him, moving with the careful, purposeful energy of a child executing a plan he had made entirely on his own. He crossed the street. He walked directly to the passenger side of the rental car. He knocked on the window with 3 small knuckles. Kang Hyun rolled it down. Travis held out a crumpled paper bag with both hands. Inside was a folded egg sandwich, still warm, and a small bottle of orange juice. He had written something on the bag in crayon, unsteady letters, a 6-year-old's handwriting that said simply, "You look hungry." Kang Hyun took the bag. He tried to speak. He could not speak. Travis studied him with those gray eyes, his gray eyes, with the frank, uncomplicated compassion of a child who has been raised by a woman who never taught him to withhold kindness from people who needed it, even people who had not yet earned it. Then he turned around and went back inside. Kang Hyun sat with that crumpled paper bag in his hands and felt something break open in his chest that had been sealed for 25 years. Not loudly. The most important things rarely happen loudly. It was quiet and total, and it reorganized everything. He picked up his phone. He called his father. And in a voice that was absolutely steady, he told Chairman Yu that the wedding was canceled. That he would not be coming back. That whatever came next, he would face it here. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Chairman Yu said, very quietly, that his son had just made the most dangerous mistake of his life. If Travis's kindness broke something open in your chest too, comment TRAVIS right now. Because a 6-year-old with a paper bag just did what no one else could. Like and subscribe so you don't miss what Chairman Yu does next, because a man like that does not accept losing quietly. Kang Hyun believed him. He had grown up inside that voice. He knew the difference between his father's anger, which was loud and theatrical, and his father's danger, which was exactly this, quiet, precise, and already in motion. Chairman Yu did not make threats. He made announcements. And what he had just announced was that the machinery of the Yu syndicate had already begun turning in a new direction, and Kang Hyun was no longer the one steering it. He understood all of this. He stayed anyway. He found a small apartment 12 minutes from Kate's house, 3rd floor, 2 rooms, a radiator that knocked all night, and a view of a parking structure. He paid 3 months up front in cash because his name, currently splashed across every Korean entertainment and business news outlet as the runaway groom who shamed 2 dynasties, was not making landlords warm to him. He unpacked 1 bag. He bought groceries. He made himself as ordinary as he possibly could, which for a man who had never once been ordinary was its own kind of discipline. Kate did not welcome him. She did not turn him away. She established terms with the efficiency of a woman who had already thought through every angle. He could be present, but he would earn presence. He would not disrupt Travis's routine. He would not make promises he wasn't prepared to keep for the next 12 years. And he would understand that her door was not open just because he had finally shown up. He agreed to every condition, without negotiation. What followed were the quietest weeks of Kang Hyun's life. He attended Travis's Saturday soccer games and stood at the far end of the sideline, separate from the other parents, clapping when Travis's team scored with the careful restraint of a man who understood he had not yet earned the right to be loud about his pride. He fixed the leaking kitchen faucet Kate had mentioned to no one in particular. He found Travis's bicycle in the garage with a bent rear wheel and spent an entire Sunday afternoon on the curb outside, teaching himself from a video on his phone how to true a wheel, getting it wrong 4 times before he got it right. Travis watched all of this from a careful distance. He was not rude. He was not warm. He treated Kang Hyun with the particular neutrality of a child who has been raised by a woman who never spoke bitterly about his father, but also never pretended there was nothing to explain. He was waiting to see if this man would still be here next week, and the week after that. The question Kang Hyun turned over during those long, humbling weeks was one he couldn't answer yet. Was he staying because he was finally becoming the man he should have been, or because somewhere in the back of his mind, he was still trying to win something? He didn't know. He kept showing up anyway. Then one afternoon, Kate received a visitor at her law office who had not been invited and was not there by accident. The visitor was a man in a gray suit who introduced himself with a fake name and sat down across from Kate's desk with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to making people uncomfortable in their own spaces. He spoke pleasantly. He mentioned Travis's school by name. He mentioned the time Kate usually left her office in the evening. He slid a plain envelope across her desk and suggested, with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes, that it might be worth her while to consider how much disruption one family could absorb before things became genuinely difficult. Kate let him finish. Then she picked up her phone, called building security, and had him removed with the same energy she would use to return a wrong order at a restaurant. Calm, final, completely unbothered. Then she called Kang Hyun. He was there in 11 minutes. He came through her office door already tense, already reading the room for threat, already positioning himself between her and whatever had frightened her. She was sitting behind her desk, with her hands folded, and her reading glasses pushed up on her head. And she had the look of a woman who had been waiting, not for rescue, but for the right moment. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down," she said. "There's something you need to know." What Kate told him in the next 10 minutes rearranged the entire architecture of everything he thought had happened to him. She had not run from Seoul in heartbreak. She had left with a plan. She had spent 6 years building an international labor law practice that was, in reality, a precisely constructed legal arsenal aimed at the heart of the U Syndicate. She had cultivated sources inside the organization. She had quietly leaked the locations of the syndicate's illegal offshore assets to the appropriate federal contacts. She had tracked the Yu family's travel manifests for 2 years, and when she confirmed that Kang Hyun would be passing through JFK Terminal 4 on the morning of the Alliance wedding, she had dressed Travis in his favorite jacket, taken him to the airport, and placed him, deliberately, calculatedly, with full knowledge of exactly what would happen, directly in his father's path. She had known Kang Hyun's guilt would detonate on contact. She had known he would follow. She had engineered the entire collision to pull him out from under the legal protection of Korean jurisdiction and strand him, willingly, on American soil, where her war file was already waiting. The man who had built his identity on being the most dangerous person in any room sat across from the woman he thought he had left behind, and understood, with a clarity that was almost physical, that he had never once been the most dangerous person in their room. Not from the very beginning. She had been running this game since Seoul. Did you see that coming? Because Kate Higgins didn't just survive, she architected. Comment chess queen if she just became your favorite character. Subscribe right now, because what happens when Kang Hyun realizes the woman he loves just dismantled his entire empire, and he has to decide how he feels about that. He sat with it for a long moment, the full weight of it. The 6 years, the airport, the paper bag, the canceled wedding, the apartment with the knocking radiator, all of it reordering itself in his mind like a puzzle that had finally been turned right side up. Then you, Kang Hyun, did something Kate had not calculated for. He laughed, quietly, with his head bowed and his hands loosely clasped between his knees, not the laugh of a man who finds something funny, but the laugh of a man who has just recognized the full size of his own blind spots and finds the honesty of it, after so many years of performance, almost relieving. He lifted his head and looked at her directly. "You played a perfect game," he said. Kate watched him carefully. She had prepared for anger. She had prepared for wounded pride, for the particular fury of powerful men who discover they have been outmaneuvered. She had not entirely prepared for this, for the quality of the stillness in him, the absence of ego in it, the way he was looking at her not with resentment, but with something that looked startlingly close to reverence. "The encryption keys," she said, after a moment. "I have everything except the final asset partition keys. Without them, the federal case has a gap." Kang Hyun nodded slowly. He had known about the gap. He had not known she knew. He reached into his jacket pocket and wrote 12 characters on the back of a business card and slid it across the desk. "That's all of it," he said. What neither of them spoke about in that moment, what sat between them in the charged silence of her office, was the question of what this meant for them. Not the case, not the syndicate. Them. A relationship that had begun in tenderness, survived in absence, and reconvened as a calculated legal operation was now standing at the threshold of something neither of them had a precedent for. And both of them were too precise, too careful, to name it prematurely. They submitted the completed war file to the federal grand jury 4 days later. The indictment moved with a speed that suggested Kate's federal contacts had been ready and waiting. Chairman Yu was arrested in Seoul on a Thursday morning, taken from his own boardroom, in front of his own people, in the building he had spent 40 years constructing as a monument to his own untouchability. The Yu syndicate, that vast and brutal architecture of fear and money, began to dismantle itself within weeks, the way these structures always do once the man at the center is removed, quickly, and without loyalty. Kang Hyun watched it on the news from his small apartment. He felt no grief for the empire. He felt only a vast, quiet openness, the feeling of a man who has put down something crushing and is only now beginning to understand how heavy it actually was. The question that remained, the only one that mattered now, was whether two people who had never had the chance to be simply themselves, with no syndicate, no secrets, no chess pieces between them, could find out who they actually were to each other. They could. It turned out they could. It did not happen in a grand moment. It happened the way real things happen, in accumulation, in repetition, in the slow and unglamorous work of two people deciding, every single day, to keep showing up for something that had no guarantee. It happened in school pickups and grocery runs and arguments about whether Travis needed a heavier winter coat. It happened in the particular rhythm of a shared life that has been chosen rather than performed. 1 year after the indictment, on a Sunday morning in November when the light came through Kate's kitchen windows the color of warm honey, Kang Hyun burned the rice. Not slightly, completely. The smoke detector went off. Travis dissolved into the particular hysteria that 7-year-olds reserve for adult failures, and Kate's grandfather, a compact, sharp-eyed man from Atlanta who had taken exactly 4 weeks to decide, he liked Kang Hyun and had been pretending otherwise ever since, sat at the kitchen table and shook his head with the slow, theatrical disappointment of a man thoroughly enjoying himself. "Boy," he said, "my granddaughter built a federal case against an international crime syndicate. She did not do all of that so you could poison her Sunday morning." Travis laughed so hard he slid off his chair. Kang Hyun stood at the stove with a dish towel and the specific expression of a man who has faced down criminal syndicates and government indictments, and finds that none of it adequately prepared him for the judgment of a 7-year-old and his great-grandfather. He fanned the smoke detector into silence, opened the window, and started over with the quiet, unkillable persistence that had become, over the past year, his most defining quality. Kate stood in the doorway in her Sunday clothes, watching all of it. This was the thing she had not calculated for, back when she was building her arsenal and mapping her legal strategy and placing chess pieces with the precision of a woman who had learned to trust her mind more than her heart. She had not calculated for the specific tenderness of watching a man who once commanded a criminal empire stand in her kitchen, fanning smoke out of a window, entirely undignified, entirely present, entirely hers. The question she sat with sometimes, in the quiet moments, was whether what she felt now, this wide, unhurried, undefended love, would have been possible if she hadn't been the one to build the trap. Whether the path to something this real, could only have been built by someone willing to play the long game. Kang Hyun turned from the stove. He found her in the doorway. And in the middle of the noise and the smoke and Travis still laughing on the floor, he looked at her with those gray eyes and said, quietly enough for only her to hear, "Best trap I ever walked into." Kate smiled, not the careful, measured smile of a woman protecting herself. The full one, the real one, the one she had been keeping safe for a very long time. She crossed the kitchen and took his hand. "And now I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. If a woman has to outsmart a man to save him from himself, to free him from the empire that was destroying him, to give their child a father worth having, is that vengeance? Or is it the most profound act of protective love a woman can offer? Tell me in the comments. Because Kate Higgins didn't just win a legal case. She rebuilt a human being. And I think you have something to say about that."